Hello, everyone. We are back after the first 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, starting off the year 5786. Shana Tova. We're continuing to read passages from Inner Work, the teachings of Rav Ashlag, page 55. The main spiritual work of Emunah takes place when a person merits to experience God's light. The main spiritual work of Emunah takes place when a person merits to experience God's light. Then the person needs to work on preferring the state of believing over the state of knowing. A person who has not yet merited divine experience does not have the option of choosing between believing and knowing. In that stage, the spiritual work is to prefer belief in the exaltedness of God over self-serving material pleasures. This is also difficult. Okay, so he's setting up a dynamic here, saying that the spiritual work of Emunah takes place when a person merits to experience God's light, meaning when a person experiences God, God's unity, God's light, the magic, the wonder, the mystery in every moment, the sacredness of every moment, that is when the main spiritual work of Emunah takes place. Because once that person has experienced God, or an altered state of communion and union with the divine, then a person has to choose Emunah over experiencing God. Meaning the person no longer is striving to experience God, as we said in previous passages, but a person is striving to live in accordance with Emunah, with this embodied faith, regardless of whether or not a person is having an experience of God firsthand in the moment. But if a person has not yet merited to experience God, hasn't had an experience of divinity, then the person doesn't have the option of choosing between believing and knowing. Knowing means the experience of God itself, and believing is faith, is emunah, in the exaltedness of God. So, in this stage, when a person has yet to experience God firsthand, the spiritual work is to prefer belief, emunah, faith, in God's exaltedness over self-serving material pleasures. So if a person has yet to experience God, then their choice, the choice they're faced with, is choosing emunah, faith and belief in God's greatness, majesty, etc., over choosing self-serving material pleasures. And the Rav concludes this passage by saying this is also difficult, meaning the first one is even more difficult, and this, choosing emunah over knowing, meaning experiencing God, this is very difficult. But this too, this other stage of choosing spiritual work over self-serving pleasures is also difficult. The Rebbe Zatzal, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, says that making the effort to connect spiritually is much greater than receiving the reward. Making the effort to connect spiritually is much greater than receiving the reward. Receiving the reward is like a servant who receives a present from the master, leaves, and is no longer connected to the master. On the other hand, while we are making an effort to connect spiritually, we feel completely dependent on God. As we feel that without God's help, we cannot succeed. We do not appreciate the importance of the effort, but this connection to God is the most important thing in life. So he's distinguishing between making the effort to connect spiritually versus receiving the actual reward of experiencing God. Making the effort means moving from a place of emunah, moving from a place of where in the moment God is not revealed. God is hidden in that moment. You're not experiencing the divine. And you're making an effort to connect spiritually, even though you're not feeling it, even though there isn't a revelation, it's not revealed. That is much greater of a reward than receiving the actual reward of experiencing God's divinity. Why? Because receiving the reward is like a servant who receives a present from the master, leaves, and is then no longer connected to the master. What does that mean? It means that the person receiving the present from the master, meaning receiving an experience of God's divinity in a moment, we receive that, but then we're no longer connected to God, to the master, because it passes, it leaves. We get the gift and then it leaves. But on the other hand, while we're making an effort, while we're striving to connect spiritually, that whole time we're feeling dependent on God, right? If I'm not feeling God and I'm crying out, please God, I need you, I need to feel you, I need to feel your presence, your light, your energy, open my heart to you, to being with you. That whole time that we're crying out, that we're striving for God, we feel completely dependent on God. And we feel that without God's help, we cannot succeed. Thus, we're feeling, in that moment, we're feeling connected to God. That's what he's saying. That the prayer, as he said before, earlier on, the prayer is the answer itself. Because once we're already reaching out to God, once we're making an effort, striving to connect to God, we're already feeling connected to God, because we feel like without God we can't succeed. And he says we do not appreciate the importance of the effort. It's the effort itself. But this connection to God is the most important thing. This connection to God through emunah, through striving, through calling out, through crying out to the divine, to the universe, to feel the life force, to feel the aliveness, to feel the sacredness and the spiritual energy in all moments and all things. This is the most important thing in life. The state of making an effort to connect spiritually is a beloved state. In this state, we realize the truth. Our lives are dependent on God. When we do not feel dependent on God, we are living in an illusion. Right? So again, similar as the last passage, just to reiterate, it's the state of making an effort to connect spiritually that is the beloved state. That is the most cherished state. That is the state which is the deepest connection. In this state, why? Because in this state we realize the truth. Our lives are completely and fully dependent on God. We are nothing without God. We can't do anything without God. We're empty without God. So we are dependent on God in all ways, always. But when we do not feel dependent on God, we are living in an illusion. And that's also part of when we just experience God. If we have some state experience, we're no longer in that state of dependence. We're in that state of union. And so the dependence and that striving falls away. This is it's so interesting, right? Because it's very opposite to what you might think. Like the striving is to get to the state of unity consciousness and connection. That's the state we're longing for, because then we are united with God. We're one with God. But the Rav is saying, at least in these several passages, that's not the highest state. That's actually, it's the opposite. That once we receive divine revelation, then in a sense we no longer feel dependent on God. We're suddenly independent of God because we're in union with God. And so that strong striving and effort making is no longer necessary. It disappears. And the Rav is saying that state of making the effort to connect spiritually is a beloved state. It is the beloved state. Because in this state we realize the truth that our lives are dependent on God. And that truth is essential for our service and our manifesting God's will on the earth. So it's really like that striving state. The Rav is just saying how powerful that is. And that's beautiful, right? I really appreciate this, because we can get so caught up in the destination, which is unity consciousness, and forget that it's actually the journey of striving and longing that is the way, that is maybe even the most important state, according to the Rav in these passages. That state of striving is actually what the highest connection. Like when we don't feel God and we're longing and we're striving to feel God, that is the place of highest connection, deepest connection in the beloved state. Because we feel that deep, deep, deep dependence on God, and that only God can help us. And that, I love that. I really want to meditate on that, because I get caught up personally in that striving for the destination of unity consciousness. And here it's the opposite. Like, don't stop striving for that. Just strive to be in calling out, in making effort to connect spiritually. It's beautiful. Final passage. We need to know that the truth about all the people mentioned in the Tanakh, the Torah, Navi, and Ketuvim, including those who seem evil in the simple meaning of the stories, is not what we were taught in kindergarten. These people were all masters of extremely high spiritual levels. I do not believe that in our generation we have people whose spiritual greatness reaches the dust of the feet of the evil characters, quote unquote, evil characters of the Torah. Their evilness is in relation to their exalted spiritual levels. We would be blessed to have people today who are able to sin the sins of those people. Okay, this is a very biblical, very different than a lot of the other passages we read. Yeah, basically, excuse me. The Rav is saying that we need to know that the truth about all the people mentioned in the Tanakh and in the Old Testament, the Torah, the prophets, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings, including all the people who seem evil, is not the way we were taught in kindergarten. It's not, I guess he's talking about like Lavan and Korach and Pharaoh, I don't know, like all Nebuchadnezzar, all these different people in the Torah. and all the stories, that they were all masters of extremely high spiritual levels, and that in our generation we don't have people whose spiritual greatness reaches even the dust of the feet of the evil characters in the Torah. That their evilness is in relation to their exalted spiritual levels. We would be blessed to have people today who are able to sin the sins of those people. So he's saying that the state of spirituality in the past was so profound, and that these people were all masters of extremely high spiritual levels, and our greatness doesn't even match the dust of the feet of the evil characters of the Torah. I don't know, a bit esoteric. Maybe it's out of my pay grade. So take it as you will. I wish you a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.